Hi, everyone. Welcome to the vBrownBag. It is Wednesday, March 12th, 2025. We have fallen forward into spring. I made up this thing that we don't spring forward and fall back. We actually fall forward and jump back. So anyways, just to confuse people. So hi, I'm Damian. I'm going to be the co-host tonight. With me is Robby Stahl. He is going to be our guest. And we're going to be talking about automated migration from VMware ESXi to KVM. But before we do that, just want to invite you all to join the community. The vBrownBag is on most of the social media platforms that we care to administrate. YouTube, of course, you're probably watching us there. We're on LinkedIn. You can catch us on Blue Sky. We are at vBrownBag.com and also on Twitch. I am Damian Carlson. On Blue Sky, I'm at 6foot.dad. None of the other co-hosts are going to be joining me this evening, I don't believe. So it's just going to be Robby and I shooting the business here. So yeah, Mr. Robby, how are you,
Damian,
sir?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for having me here. I'll pretend that we've never met before for a brief moment, and then we'll move on. But
yeah. So about that, let's talk about that. Where do you work?
So I work for a surprisingly small company in San Jose called Platform 9. So if you think you just heard a Harry Potter reference, you did. It actually is a reference to Platform 9 3/4, I believe. And we do managed OpenStack, managed Kubernetes, and yeah, it's a pretty cool place. But I'm not here to advertise. I just want to show something that I think is pretty cool that we've built and we're sharing with the world to kind of catalyze movement from VMware to OpenStack in the general sense. We happen to be an OpenStack vendor, but that's literally not the main reason to be here.
Yeah. And for the sake of transparency, I also work for Platform 9. I joined back in January of 2025 doing tech marketing and community management for our up-and-coming community edition version of our private cloud software. I'm actually wearing my Damian from vBrownBag hat tonight and not my Platform 9 hat, so I will do my best to stay vendor agnostic. So there we have it. Robby, I've got a question for you just before we get started. What's your opinion on boba tea?
Boba tea.
Yeah.
So I've had it maybe 3 or 4 times. It's interesting that I actually have a pretty strong sweet tooth, but even I start to lose interest most of the way through boba tea. I don't know why. It's just something about it. It's not a textural problem. It's just it's too much. And this is from a man that eats Snickers bars as a snack, right?
Oh yeah. Because you're not when you're hungry. I actually had my first boba tea today. My soon to be 17-year-old was going to run in and grab some boba tea, and I was like, "Hey, grab me an iced coffee because I've been working all day, and then I've got to do this podcast thing." So he comes back with an iced coffee that has the little boba things in it, and it was an interesting experience trying to drink some coffee and instead inhaling marbles. So, but yeah,
did I also get 30 marbles.
There wasn't much of a flavor to it. It was just, it was interesting. But much like what you said, I kind of lost interest about halfway through. I typically drink my coffee black, and so it was a little bit sweet for me. But anyways, that's my story of how I tried boba tea for the first time.
So what's funny is you making the reference to the Snickers, you're not you when you're hungry. I actually did that to a guy at work who was losing his mind about something. So I used to work in an open office environment. And there was a guy, about 3 times a week, he would just lose his absolute mind at his computer. And one time it was just a bridge too far for me. So I simply walked into his office when he calmed down, just had a Snickers bar down, walked out.
Oh yeah.
And then he came by later. He's like, "I'm sorry, I'll be better." I'm like, "Thanks. That's all I need," right?
Yeah. We have a thing around here in my house. We call it being hangry, right? It's like I'm sorry for what I said when I was hungry, but I'm better now. I thought I was going to die, but I didn't. So I made it. Yay!
Indeed.
Yes, sir. So, where would you like to start with your topic this evening?
Sure. I guess let's start with generally what it is and why we chose to build it. So vJailbreak is vJailbreak is a tool that's open source that allows you to take virtual machines running in VMware and actually do a copy of the disk state to an OpenStack environment. And then you can actually do interesting things like you can schedule the cutover for a certain period in time, or you can just execute it yourself. Obviously, we can't do a live migration of the virtual machine because, well, it would be a wonderful patent and following trial if we actually found a way to get live memory pages out of VMware into a KVM host, right? But there's a very, very, very brief cutover, because what we do is we move the disk, or we copy the disk image over. We actually do some preparation in the guest so it'll be ready to run in KVM. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff that doesn't fit in this conversation that has to do with driver management and those sort of things. And then when the user decides, you turn off the VMware guest, you start the KVM guest, the OpenStack guest, and it's just up and running. Depending on how you have your networking configured, if you've done some homework ahead of time, then you can actually use the same IP in the OpenStack environment. Say you're having DHCP leases managed by Infoblox or something. It can be a very beautiful thing. So that's what it does. The reason we did it is, did you have a question there?
No, I was just going to say it actually kind of reminds me of, and I'm probably showing my age here, but the old VMware converter, right? Back in the day of like, before there was only ESXi, we even had ESX available to us, and, VMware converter would allow us to connect to physical servers and virtualize them, and then have a brief cutover, and then boom, you have a VM up in vCenter, and it was great. Yeah,
I remember, tangent, then I'll go back on topic. So around that time, I was actually working for a public university, and I decided that I was tired of the certain trappings of IT, so I P2V'd my laptop so I could run Linux on my laptop, right? But still be mostly compliant. Yeah, that's a long ago.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so as to why vJailbreak exists, I mean, we are a company, so in the very primary sense, we were motivated by money, but this is something we're giving back to the community, right? And so when you consider a migration from one hypervisor ecosystem to another, you basically need two things. One, a way to use your existing hardware, which we sort out in another way. But then you need a way to actually, if possible, migrate the guests, because most people don't want to recreate a bazillion virtual machines. Like, in the general sense, if there's a 10-year-old virtual machine, it's there because 5 years ago, nobody wanted to touch it, and they super don't want to touch it now. Or maybe it's some super unique virtual appliance that just is not easy to deal with, right? And so we decided that the fundamental enabler that needed to be built there is a programmatic way to migrate virtual machines from VMware to something else. And so we looked in the market to see what other things are out there. And I won't name names, but there are solutions where, whether you involve professional services or are willing to pay a fee per instance, you can spend easily $50 to $100 per virtual machine, right? And that just that was existentially offensive to us. We needed to find a better way. So we built it. And that's how we got where we are now.
Yeah, I remember years ago I was working for EMC before Dell swallowed them up. And I was in I was in EMC consulting, which was business consulting, and a lot of managed services work and data center migrations, whether it would be physical to virtual or virtual to virtual. That was a big business, right? And I think that at the time, the average hourly billing rate, of course, this was not paid to the consultant, but this is what what would be charged to the customer, was about $250 an hour, right? And so your economies of scale might be able to help you out there if you're able to move a lot of things in parallel at $250 an hour. But yeah, I can definitely see how that would add up quickly. And I'm sure $250 an hour is probably not the going rate these days.
I honestly should know that, but I literally have no idea. I mean, like if you adjust for time, back then that was probably like call it 400% markup versus the hominid's actual paid rate. Like, yeah, that's probably a 4-digit thing now. So.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
All right.
So that's why vJailbreak exists. And so, let's very briefly, I'll show you the GitHub repo so the world knows where to find it. And then we'll talk about a brief demonstration.
Ta-da!
Yep. All right. So here we have github.com platform9 vJailbreak. This is public. I urge anybody who's watching this and interested to go through it, use it, try to break it. If you find something, either just open an issue directly with us, or if you're motivated, branch it, fix it, send a pull request. Right? We will incorporate it. And so as you scroll down, there is a video that actually just goes through very quickly what I'm going to show as well. But it does what it says on the tin, right? So you point it at VMware and you point it at your environment, and then you just run a migration. Like, you make a couple selections about networking and storage, things that one cannot easily infer, or perhaps you're in a hypervisor environment where there are multiple options, right? And then at the time of the migration, like I said earlier, but I touched on it very briefly, you have some options about essentially when the cutover will happen, and the order of operations of whether you copy the disk and then kill the guest, or kill the disk, quick copy the disk, and then start it again. Mm-hmm. And so as it runs, you get a progress, which is pretty much expected these days. You can no longer get away with just waiting, right? And then when it's done, the guest that was running in VMware has gone through an existential event. And so it's now running in OpenStack, and where reasonably necessary, drivers have been replaced, and it's just up and running. So, and then, there's a FAQ at the bottom. Essentially, this is a wonderful tool, but it's still very early. So there are some fun edge cases, right? But that's basically it. So what have I neglected to cover there?
I don't know. I actually think that you covered all of my kind of initial questions about it.
Let's still show this. So again, this is Platform 9's private cloud directory, but that's not why we're here. This is just a generic OpenStack environment, right? So kind of get an idea of how the lifecycle works. This is a virtual machine of vJailbreak. So mechanically, what happens is you would, from the Git repo, grab the image. Actually, we pull it from some container registry, or not even container registry, some artifact registry that escapes me up right now. But you grab that image, you actually deploy it in OpenStack. And so within that virtual machine, we actually spawn a small K3s cluster, which is Kubernetes API compliant. And then within that, we build basically the worker that's going to look at VMware and look at OpenStack, and then just take one thing and put it in the other. So,
cool.
Yeah.
I don't know who that Damian at Platform 9 is, but I bet he's highly attractive.
I imagine he's about 6 foot.
Yeah. Yes. He's probably a dad of some sort.
Probably a dad of some sort. Also, for the studio audience, I am multi-boxing right now due to something that just isn't worth sorting out in the time available with VPNs, as sometimes happens with demos. But so kind of our proof of work here is that we have a web store. And so what I'm going to do is very quickly, I'm going to go throw some shoes in my shopping cart, right? And so I'm going to say, I want only red shoes. Let's throw these into my cart, right? Okay. Add to cart. Of course. I'm 5'6", but sure, I wear a size 11. Let's roll with it. Okay. So now we can see this is in my cart. Okay. So we've created some state. Now let's actually go and start the migration of the web server for this multi-tier application. So I'm going to do in the other screen.
There we go.
Yeah, okay. So let me back out here a bit. So this is the actual vJailbreak interface. And so the reason I was showing the virtual machine earlier is that there actually is a full web application for doing these migrations that exist. I should look at this camera, that exist within the virtual machine, right? This is actually running in Kubernetes in a virtual machine on a hypervisor. it's a bit turtley if I'm all told here, right? So we actually have a couple credentials already stored. We have one for the vCenter, which we will be pulling the guest out of, and we have one for the OpenStack environment where we will be instantiating the guest. So let's start a migration. So I'm going to use these credentials and these credentials, so my source and target. I forgot to warm this up. So we have a couple minutes to tell jokes.
Okay, great.
What's your best worst dad joke?
Oh, my best worst dad joke. I really like going to a Brazilian steakhouse, and it's always fun to say that it costs $1 Brazilian. Like, so I really enjoy that one. Yeah. I think that's probably the one that was top of mind. How about you? Do you have any good terrible puns?
I do have some puns. They're escaping me right now, but I have one good bad dad joke. Good dad joke? Yeah. I guess when you match the qualifiers together, it's all the same, right?
I celebrate the entire catalog.
Yes. So what's the hardest part about hunting elephants?
Don't know.
Carrying the decoys.
Oh my God. That's silly. That's a good one.
Yep. All right. So while we're waiting, what's happening is that vJailbreak is actually made an API call to VMware, and it's pulling out the entire virtual machine inventory, right? So all the guests that are currently running and other things about their state. And so once I have that data, we've already applied a filter, so to look for things that are only match the partial token eStore. And then we will migrate the web application portion.
So are you planning on moving just one of the VMs or both of them?
So I was planning to just move one. We could probably move both. I mean, it should work. I haven't tried it in this environment, and I can't remember if the IP addressing changes between them. But
it actually does. Yes.
Okay. That's also so full disclosure. Like this is a bit of an interesting environment right now. For a larger organization, basically, you would from your desk or your VPN endpoint, you would be able to gloriously reach the infrastructure on both ecosystems, right? vCenter or vSphere and OpenStack. In this case, things are a little complicated just because, well, we have multiple labs and we're trying to move fast. Mm-hmm. I can't really church that up any worse. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. So the vCenter actually lives inside the VPN. It's located in a data center out of Phoenix. The hypervisor hosts are located on the other side of the country. And so this migration will actually be happening over a VPN connection. Should you actually be moving environments that share the same physical network, like from rack to rack, for example, I would expect this to go a lot faster.
Starting to wonder something. It's been 2 minutes. That? Is the vCenter guest still on the VPN that I established earlier? Or excuse me, not the vCenter guest. Is the vJailbreak machine still on the VPN?
Yes, because it authenticated.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, yes, it must be. Good catch.
Did you ever see the first Ace Ventura movie years and years ago?
You know, I honestly haven't. I've seen all sorts of weird stuff, including Zardoz and Outland, like the weird space western with, I guess both of those have Sean Connery, but I never saw Ace Ventura. So.
Well, it was, it hit at like a pretty impressionable time in my late teenage years, right? And we were just quoting the heck out of the movie. But there was one line where he says, "If I'm not back in 5 minutes, just wait longer." And so I think that actually applies here to this to the VMs.
So, related reference: have you seen the movie Snatch?
Indeed, I have, and I do like DAGs. Yes.
So, yes, I see. How long for those sausages? So.
2 minutes Turkish. So it's always a good time when you've got shared references. It's just
absolutely
it's a good bonding moment.
Now
you mentioned.
Now I am curious about something.
Yeah,
1982.
A little bit farther back, 1977. Okay. Yep.
Oh, that's not too bad.
Yeah, I was one. I was that part of that really unique generation that grew up early with no internet, and then now here we are, right? Like so. Yeah. My Hotmail account, I think I got around 1996, which is pretty crazy.
I think I actually got mine at the same time. I never migrated it to live, and it's like they eventually gave up at some point. So I still have, like some 22 character thing at hotmail.com. That's actually my Steam login. I mean, the actual mail goes to Gmail now, but yeah,
right.
It's weird permanent tokens. So,
yeah, I got on early enough that I was able to get a really, it was just based on my name, right? And so, I didn't have to do any of the other silly things. So It's not Damian at Hotmail, but it's close.
Nice. All right. Well, how much more time do we want to? I'm not a huge fan of the sunk cost fallacy. How much more longer do we want to watch this? So.
We don't have to keep waiting for this to spin.
Okay.
If you'd rather not, for the sake of moving forward, we can definitely do something. What'd you have in mind?
So basically, I don't have any chicken bones to throw at the sky to appease the demo gods. So if you'd like, we could play the video with no audio and I could walk through it, or we could just move on to some other topic and keep going. However you want to play it.
Yeah, let's just watch the demo video.
Okay. So then also Robby Stahl, it should be done presenting now, and regular Robby Stahl is ready to present.
Okay.
Very quickly, this is vJailbreak. So this is what I walked through. So we fill in some things in the migration form. In this part, we're actually setting up the credentials to connect to VMware. In the demo I tried to execute, these were already in place. Why did that pause? What in the wide world of sports is happening? Okay. Am I cursed? Did I back over a witch or something? What the? Almost broke the PG-13 rating.
It's okay. I have a very fun beep button that I can do in post. So yes.
But the live audience will be unimpressed with my
yes.
Was it profanity is the inevitable crutch of the inarticulate expletive deleted, right?
Yes.
Okay, I genuinely don't understand the problem here. Please, in the audience, watch the video. But what happens is essentially you feed us some credentials, you get prompted with some virtual machines, you select the one or n that you want to move, you answer a couple things about storage, target network, you kick it off, you go find a beverage, you come back, and it's done. And if you told it to auto start, it will now be running in OpenStack and halted in VMware. Mm-hmm. It is genuinely magic. I just wish that I could conjure it in this moment, but so be it.
Yeah, that's quite all right. Sometimes the demo gods are not appeased. So are you aware of any customers that are currently using this to move their environments?
I am. So not going to name the advantage parties here, but yes, I have multiple customers that are using this to migrate, 4 and 5 digit number of VMs is the plan, right? Mm-hmm. What's interesting is vJailbreak right now actually supports concurrently moving some 2 digit number of virtual machines. While it's kind of interesting if you really love thrashing all your storage and networking, what the most important part there is that you can queue up a lot of work and then just walk away and it'll be ready when you come back, right? So you don't have to babysit the tool or the appliance that actually does the work. It just does the thing. And kind of back to what you were saying about, rebill rates, like if you teach a few people to use this, a couple people and a weekend and some pizzas and a half rack of Fresca could migrate an entire data center's worth of virtual machines, which is astounding, like full stop. So do you know if folks are using it to
to also change their underlying infrastructure? I mean, of course, the hypervisor is changing, right? But are they shifting to different storage backends or different networks entirely, or is it kind of like a lift and shift sort of a thing?
So
Do you have a
for
sense
for
for
the
that?
customers, I do. For the customers I'm currently working with, for the most part, they're basically rolling through and replacing VMware with OpenStack. So they're actually using, this is currently true for all of them, they're using the same storage, even the same IPAM or other ancillary solutions.
Mm-hmm.
What they're doing is, if it's a large environment, then they just pull off one hypervisor and move it from VMware to OpenStack. If it's a small environment, they add a hypervisor to OpenStack and move all this and evacuate one host, then tear it down. Right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you have the free capacity, then n-1 works. If not, n+1 is how you got to do it. But for the most part, how do I say this delicately? When one chooses to anger their customers en masse, they solve that problem quickly, right?
Yeah.
And so those customers have decided to solve the hypervisor cost first, and then go back and revisit any infrastructure debt that have had pending. What's been interesting is that I have one customer that was going to move a lot of virtual machines, but as they started going through that planning process, they realized this is a very good opportunity to actually not do that. So they're actually making, not for all the work, like we still have a large portion of the virtual machines that were in scope for the migration
Mm-hmm.
that will be migrated, but a lot of them, the other half of that set, they're actually going to take the time to build them using code, using a declarative model,
Right.
Because this is, when you've already torn the floor out of the bathroom, why not fix everything else while you're there, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so that was actually a surprise to us. Like, we expected people want to avoid that at all costs, but it turns out no. Like, they've reached this righteous fury of constructive. I don't want to use that word, but they're making changes that they would normally not do, but they're in such a mood now that they just want to get it right, and
Wow.
it's actually kind of cool.
That is really cool. Cool from the sense that as an IT practitioner, like that, you're actually kind of working to eliminate some of that technical debt and trying to put that declarative, like, infrastructure as code stuff in place, which will only help you in the future, right? So I think that's pretty awesome that they're taking the opportunity to do that. I know from very painful experience, kind of referencing back to my consulting days, we had customers that were doing kind of an application rationalization effort where they would look at everything and then try to determine, is it worth upgrading? Is it worth decommissioning? Do we just maintain it, et cetera? And that can be an extremely painful process. So I can only imagine. Yeah. I can only imagine if they're re-architecting their infrastructure, they're probably also re-architecting some of how the business might use that infrastructure, which, wow, that's like, getting surgery while you're awake, I guess. So
Yes.
it's extremely painful, but I'm stoked to hear that folks are willing to do that. So yeah.
There's also there are some wonderful opportunities for refactoring when you're doing something like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that you have a zero downtime application, and right now it's just a pool of virtual machines that are running in resilient infrastructure. But you now have to have a downtime because you're going to actually have to halt at least one of those virtual machines, right?
Right.
So you now have a really cool opportunity. You can put load balancing outside of the cluster with health monitoring. And so then you can scale that application to OpenStack and then start killing the virtual machines that are running in VMware.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can still have a node downtime migration from one hypervisor ecosystem to another, which is bizarre to say out loud, but we can do that, right?
Yeah, we can. It all depends on how that application is structured, but absolutely. Yeah.
There's also so what you were saying earlier about and I've had a lot of experience like with this in past roles, is people like somebody years ago, probably like a a mid-career CS grad, or maybe like an intern, built something really cool over a summer, sort of documented it and left. And that became business critical at some point, and nobody wants to touch it, right?
Right.
And so this isn't directly related to hypervisors or vJailbreak, but in a past role, I worked for a company where they'd had web application firewalls and other like really detailed and just cool ways to protect things, right? Mm-hmm. And so that sort of idea allows you to encapsulate technical debt. You're just putting enough money in front of it that you hope nobody will ever find the way to drill all the way through the layers you put there, right?
Right.
It's sort of like with Chernobyl, we built the first thing and they were like, oh, try harder. Then we built the second sarcophagus, right? Mm-hmm. So for companies that are willing to rip off the Band-Aid right now, it's laudable.
Yeah. That's really cool. And it's also really heartening to hear that folks are wanting to put in the work. You know, I've been in this business long enough to see companies who have a CIO that come in, they outsource everything, they get all the pats on the back because they saved all the money, and then they bounce, and then everything goes downhill from there, right? And then it's the next person's job to repatriate that back, right? And that's usually a pretty painful process as well. And so, you know, having that foresight and that determination to want to get it right for the sake of the business, even if it is disruptive and painful, I can only applaud that. That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Back when I was a prod admin, you know, we didn't do that stuff.
Yep. Long ago, I actually administered a virtual, a private cloud, essentially, small scale, but you know, and people treated it the same way they do anything they don't directly pay for, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you've ever been in an established environment, people create virtual machines. They don't really care about the resource usage because it just gets oversubscribed to oblivion, and it's not their problem, right?
Right.
But then Kubernetes came out, and thou shalt not oversubscribe a Kubernetes node. Like you cannot do that in the general sense, right? And so application developers started becoming a little more precise. And then they decided to just request more resources than they really need, because why actually do all the instrumentation, right?
Right.
So, but the behavior is still there. And so making people go through the pain of examining all their virtual machines, I suspect the average company will find like 1/3 to half of them aren't in any way business critical. Like people just park so much state because they're not the one paying the light bill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a weird catalyst effect.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I remember back in, again, the prod admin days, there were some machines you just turned off and then waited to see what happened. Because no one knew what it did or what it was for or why it was there, right? It's like, why do we have a server that has like 12 modems hanging out of the back of it? Like, I don't know. Turn it off and see what happens. You know, of course, that's not for everyone, right? You need to be very, very careful with that approach. But sometimes there's not much else you can do, especially if you haven't taken the time to properly document your infrastructure and yada, yada, yada. We all know that story.
Well, one of my favorite customers lovingly refers to that as the scream test. Like you halt the machine and then see where the scream comes from, right?
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yep. It can be really effective, providing it doesn't, you know, break everything, right? Like the one thing that your entire business runs off of, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm feeling like we might be kind of running low on things to talk about from a vJailbreak perspective. Is there anything else that's kind of top of mind that you'd like to talk about, Robby?
Always yes, but I'm trying to think of what fits in the scope of the show, right?
Yeah.
Let's compare a minor bit of philosophy for a second. So I consider the point of computers at this stage of development to be a thing to abuse constructively. So what I mean by that, and I even own the domain name like weshallplay.com, because the idea is that computers should do all the work, and we should be able to step back and do more abstract things and enjoy life with less toil. How have you approached that? Like, how do you feel?
That's a really good question. I feel like there's still the same level of work, and so what I'm thinking about when you ask me that question is kind of like the rise of generative AI, right? Like,
Okay.
and I use that quite a bit. I used it when I was looking for a job, just to help me rewrite this, help me with the cover letter, help me tell me more about this role or this company, right? Almost kind of using it like a search engine. But I feel like you still have to keep your hand on the wheel, but it does kind of automate some of the, I don't know, the boring parts, right? Like word crafting, for example, right? How do I want to rephrase this sentence? How do I want to shape this paragraph? What is this talk track going to look like? That sort of stuff. Gen AI has been fantastic for me, to kind of help me with that, right? Versus getting stuck in the like writer's block space and then, going for a walk and then suddenly having all the ideas show up, right? It's so I feel like it's kind of automated some of that boring stuff away. At least what I would consider boring stuff. If you write for a living and you're listening to this podcast, thank you. I'm glad you're here, but I don't mean to insult what you do. I do not at all. It's just the way that my brain works. I would rather make video content than write,
Yeah.
So yeah. Was that kind of what you had in mind when you asked the question, or were you thinking about something else?
That was, so I was asking in kind of an abstract sense, but what you said actually matches with how I do it, just from the strangely opposite direction. So as an example, I used to absolutely love driving. Then I moved to a place with a lot of traffic. So I bought a robot because I wanted to offload the parts I don't enjoy, right? So I make a computer drive me around.
Right.
Because then I can actually enjoy the things I actually care about, like, thinking about what I want to do with my day in my head while supervising to make sure the robot doesn't run somebody over, right? I actually do enjoy the act of writing and being challenged to come up with something creative. So I choose not to use generative AI for that. But I have occasionally used it to summarize something that's just so huge. I'm like, I don't have 2 hours right now. Is it worth investing 2 hours later?
Right.
Maybe, right? And so I do see some value there. It was fascinating to compare use cases, honestly.
Yeah, for a long time, kind of my writing process, and it's mostly just entirely been like blog posts, right? Is I would have an idea, and then I would think about that idea over time. Invariably, I don't know why, taking a shower. I've come up with so many great ideas just taking a shower, right? I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a distraction. Maybe it's just the sensory white noise. I don't know. But, I can still do those things for sure. But I think Gen AI kind of helps get past that first step and get me to where I want to go, which is actually producing the content rather than kind of spending all the time thinking about how I want to arrange it, right?
Makes sense.
So it kind of draws an outline for me, right? And then I get to color it in. So that's how I think about it. I actually do really enjoy writing. It can be such a production for me that even writing a simple technical blog post can take a long time, like hours, right? Because you got to write it all down, and then you got to get all the screenshots, and you got to get all the links, and then you got to proofread it, and then you got to think about it some more, right? It's just it would take a long time, and that was just on my own personal blog, right? Like things that I was writing for the love of wanting to get it out there, rather than because I was being paid to do so. So yeah, that was a painful process. Is there another type of kind of automation that springs to mind beyond just the robot that drives you around?
Yeah, so I very much subscribe to a lot of the core Unix philosophies. Like if it's worth doing once, it's worth automating so you don't have to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And so like very much that. Even if a task that I know I'll do it twice and I can do it in 5 minutes, I'm not as good about this as I used to be in terms of self-discipline, but it is genuinely rewarding to spend the 10, 30, even an hour to automate it because for one, I don't have to do this particular dumb thing again. And two, it goes into the library of random snippets, right? Mm-hmm. Anybody who's been in this field for a long time has, however you store it. For some of us, it's just directories with unstructured text files. You just go grepping for things. Some people actually build their own wikis. I'm not that guy, but it's...
A coworker of ours just told me about Dash, I think, for Mac. And it's fantastic for saving snippets. And you can even do kind of like I can't even think of the word, like an expansion, right? So you could copy this snippet into your terminal and it'll be like, this is the place where you put in an IP address, right? So and it's super easy to search. It's fantastic, right? Because my job, and I'm positive that your job is like this, there's always little bits of code, right? Like, how did I look at those Ethernet interfaces before with colors? I forget, right? Like, oh, okay, well, I saved the snippet. Yay. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's very handy.
Yeah, it's also, after this, I'll let the topic go, but also, so while I don't work in the security field for pay, I kind of occasionally dabble with doing CTF, so capture the flags. And there are a lot of things in there where sometimes it is literally faster to just brute force it as hardware advances versus when the problem was written. And so, yeah, that is explicitly automating my way around having the better idea, right?
Right.
This is no real guilt about it, just turning some watts into free time. So
yeah, for sure. So what's next for you? Do you have any plans to speak at any conferences or a great vacation you're looking forward to?
So I don't have anything on my conference schedule. I used to, and at a previous company, they used to fly me to the sales conference basically every year to present things to people. And I truly enjoyed that. I do enjoy speaking. The problem is lately I don't really have much that I want to speak about. Like I don't know if you go through this kind of periods in life where sometimes after work you spend the weekends just hacking on something. I'm going through this period of life where after work I kind of don't want to touch the computer. I just want to like read or watch Silo or something, right?
Yes.
But it is also, I found that at least for me here in the Seattle area, there's very much a seasonality to it. Like when I haven't seen the day star in a couple months, I'm really just getting through the day. But in the summer when it's nice, paradoxically, I want to spend all day inside doing something really fun. So.
Yeah. So speaking of hacking and little things, this is way off topic. So thanks for sticking around, y'all. So I really like LEDs, right? And so there is a guy on the internet named Dave Plummer. Whoops, I think my power connection went weird. Anyways, he's like Dave's Garage, I think, on YouTube. Yep. So he built this little LED thing that my camera is trying to see. What's cool is this board back here, he had custom made. It runs ESP32. It powers a Hub 75 LED matrix. It's got a microphone on it, so it can pick up audio. It's got a little remote control that I can use. And so what I did last night was modifying this little circuit thing to use different palettes based on the remote control. So yeah, fun little hacking stuff. And it was actually super easy. It was just like one line. But, understanding a foreign code base, and it's all like mostly written in C and C++, because it's like embedded software, right? But yeah, understanding the code base and trying to figure out like, okay, where does this go? Why is this here? What happens if I make this change? And then you have to build it and upload it, right? Like there's a little bit of a delay, right, to see if you broke it or not. But yeah, that actually brings me a lot of joy. And the other night I sat at this desk and I screwed around with it for a couple hours and got nowhere. And it was fantastic.
Absolutely.
I loved every second of it.
Exactly. Like I will never be equivalent to Newth, but I have his teachings to read through and maybe grasp a little bit of what he understood intrinsically, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned Dave Plummer. A few months ago, I found his YouTube channel, and the guy feels like my real dad, like in terms of just like personality and his, like the things he chooses to do with his time. Like he's just awesome, right?
Yeah.
So it is related to what I want to do next. Is I don't know when I'll make the transition, but approaching mid-40s, I'm kind of like, well, what do I want to do when I grow up? Well, I already grew up, but what do I want to do is the more general question there.
Right.
And I've been thinking about moving from basically kind of software and systems to computer engineering. Like I find hardware just a fascinating problem space. It's also fun to watch how we rediscover things that Seymour Cray sorted out in the 70s for us. And we're just like, oh, you can immerse the server. We're like, yeah, he was shoving Floriner through wafers, like literally before you were born, right? This is not novel, but good for you. And it's also interesting to me is that at least in the US, we seem to have the opposite of a surplus, a deficit in the number of people that are doing actual hardware design and integration, right? And so I feel like it would just be a fun field. I could probably do something really, really interesting and innovative there.
Yeah.
I also, there's a cool keyboard shop in San Jose where you can get a super large buckling spring key. So
cool.
And you actually could build a keyboard with it. So it has leads. I also, just in the general sense, I'm a big fan of heterogeneous architectures. So in my garage, I actually have a working, like it's squared away, dual Power Mac G5 1.8 with 8 gigs of RAM. I actually have an old I forget which exact Sun system, but I have a Sun pizza box, right? Got lots of fun stuff. It's just, I also have a Commodore 128 as a restoration project, which I realized is about equivalent in terms of age and time commitment to square it away as trying to restore an old car, which is a funny situation to be in. And it's even about as hard to source parts these days, right? So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's cool. We actually live in pretty magical times. The board that I was just showing you that Dave made, he just went out to one of those PCB websites that are out there, right? You upload your schematic. A few days later, it arrives by mail, right? And we can do that with so many different things. You can do metal machining on demand, right? Like here, make me this gear, right? And ta-da, it shows up in the mail. It's really, really cool that sort of stuff is out there. And I think it's going to really help enable some very cool things in the future. Providing we all just keep being chill and getting along.
Yes.
So be chill, everyone.
Indubitably.
Yes, sir. Well, it has been a good talk, and we're about 10 minutes away from the top of the hour, or the top of our hour together. Any final thoughts or anything you'd like to plug or let folks know where they can find you?
Nothing I really want to plug. I generally am not the kind of guy to tell people where to find me, but in this context, it's both expected and honestly good. So I am on LinkedIn. You can find me as Robby Stahl. I think that's literally the URL. I don't really use any other social media. Like I even deactivated my Facebook account years ago because I was just like, why am I doing this? And it turns out once I did that, nothing really changed. I just had slightly more free time. People who still want to keep in touch had my phone number, right?
Everyone forgets your birthday. That's really that's the worst thing about it.
Exactly. But yeah, that's basically it. I enjoyed our conversation. I mean, obviously we've talked in the work context, but do something a little more structured yet unstructured, and also outside of work hours has been a lot of fun. I'd happily come speak with you again about. I'm sure we can find a topic that's interesting. I just enjoy teaching about things in the general sense. Like if you've never gone through a CTF puzzle, I'd be happy to show you how that is. It's actually pretty fun. And it's pretty cool to see how to, it's one thing to build something, right? Mm-hmm. It's another exercise entirely to figure out how somebody else probably built something and then see if you're correct. And I find a lot of fun in that.
That is very interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
Yes. I would actually love to see that. So yes, you know where to find our sign up, and yeah, we'll get you scheduled in as soon as you'd like. So yeah.
Fantastic.
All righty. Well, everyone, thank you very much for your time. It's been fantastic. I appreciate you. Thanks for showing up and hanging out with us, and we'll catch you all next time.
Thank you, everybody.